Welcome back, my friends. Tonight we're peeling away the polished armor and stepping into the mud-soaked boots of medieval knights. Not the gallant heroes of fairy tales, but the overworked, underfed men who bled for kings and rarely saw glory. This episode is called Why It Sucked to Be a Medieval Knight, but there's more, much more. We're talking bone-crushing battles, bad hygiene, political backstabbing, and a lifetime of service that could end with an infected wound or a forgotten grave. This isn't fantasy, it's real history, the kind that helps you drift off, not because it's dull, but because it's stripped of drama and full of gritty truth. If this kind of quiet, thoughtful unraveling of the past speaks to you, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, but only if it feels natural. Tell me where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. There's something comforting about the idea of all of us sharing this slow descent into history, one yawn at a time. So dim the lights, get cozy, and let's go back to a time when being called a knight didn't mean honor. It meant hardship. You are 7 years old, and your childhood ends today. The morning mist clings to the cobblestones of your father's manor courtyard as you stand beside a worn leather travelling sack, watching a man in fine woolen robes approach on horseback. Your mother's tears fall silently as she adjusts your rough-spun tunic one final time. You don't understand why she weeps. This is supposed to be an honor. Your father has arranged for you to serve as a page in the household of a lord whose lands stretch beyond the horizon you've never crossed. The horse's hooves echo against stone as you're lifted onto the back of the stranger's mount. Your small hands grip the saddle's edge, knuckles white with uncertainty. Behind you, your mother's figure grows smaller until the morning fog swallows her entirely. This is how your transformation from child to warrior begins, not with fanfare or ceremony, but with the simple, brutal severing of family bonds that medieval society demands of its future knights. Your new home towers above you like a stone giant, its walls stretching upward until they seem to scrape the grey English sky. The great hall echoes with your footsteps as you're led inside, the sound swallowed by tapestries depicting battles you cannot yet comprehend. The air carries the scent of rushes mixed with the lingering smoke of countless hearth fires, and somewhere in the distance you hear the rhythmic clang of metal against metal, sounds that will soon become the soundtrack of your daily existence. As a page, your days begin before dawn breaks over the castle walls. You stumble from your straw pallet in the servants' quarters, your breath visible in the cold morning air. Your first task is always the same, tending to your lord's chamber pot, a duty that strips away any romantic notions you might have harboured about knightly service. The smell hits you like a physical blow, but you learn quickly that showing disgust earns you a sharp cuff across the ear from the castle's steward. Your hands, once soft from your mother's gentle care, quickly grow rough and calloused from endless chores. You carry water from the well until your shoulders ache, scrub floors until your knees are raw, and tend fires until soot becomes a permanent feature beneath your fingernails. The other pages, boys like yourself torn from their families, become your brothers in this strange new world of servitude disguised as education. The castle's hierarchy reveals itself to you slowly, like layers of an onion being peeled away. At the bottom, you discover, are the serfs who work the surrounding lands, people whose lives are bound to the soil as surely as roots bind trees to earth. Above them stand the craftsmen and merchants, their status measured in the quality of their goods and the weight of their purses. The knights occupy a realm above these common folk, but even they bow their heads when the Lord passes, his presence commanding silence in halls that normally ring with conversation. You learn to read the subtle signs of power, how a man's clothing speaks of his wealth, how the cut of his hair announces his station, how even the way he walks can proclaim his place in the world's grand design. The Lord's wife moves through the castle like a ship cutting through calm water, servants parting before her without conscious thought. Her children, barely older than yourself, already carry themselves with the unconscious arrogance of those born to command others. Your education begins not with books. Literacy is a luxury reserved for clerics and the highest nobility, but with observation and imitation. You watch how the squires serve at table, memorizing the precise angle at which a cup should be held, the exact distance to maintain from a lord's elbow. You learn that speaking without permission can earn you a day without food, that clumsiness might result in a beating, and that your value is measured entirely by your usefulness to those above you. The physical demands of page life reshape your young body with ruthless efficiency. Your legs grow strong from countless trips up and down stone stairs. Your arms develop lean muscle from carrying heavy burdens, and your hands become skilled at tasks you never imagined existed. You learn to polish armor until it gleams like water, to care for weapons with the reverence others reserve for holy relics, and to anticipate your betters' needs before they voice them. Sleep, when it finally comes, brings little rest. You share a cramped space with other pages, your straw mattress providing minimal comfort against the stone floor's chill. The boy beside you often weeps quietly into his thin blanket, homesick for a family he may never see again. You want to comfort him, but exhaustion pulls you toward unconsciousness before you can find the words. The seasons change around the castle walls, but your routine remains constant, an endless cycle of service, learning, and gradual hardening. You begin to understand that this is not temporary hardship, but the foundation upon which your entire future will be built. Every callus on your hands, every ache in your muscles, every moment of humiliation serves a purpose in the grand design of creating a knight. Your 7th birthday passes unnoticed by anyone but yourself. You mark it privately, remembering your mother's face and wondering if she thinks of you on this day. The child you were when you arrived at this castle feels like a distant memory, replaced by someone harder, more watchful, more resigned to the harsh realities of medieval life. As winter approaches and the castle prepares for the long, dark months ahead, you realize that your transformation has already begun. The soft boy who wept for his mother has started to disappear, replaced by someone who understands that survival depends on strength, cunning, and absolute obedience to the rigid hierarchy that governs every aspect of medieval existence. Section 2. The Squire's Burden. Learning the Art of War. You are 14 now, and the boy who once wept into his straw mattress has been replaced by someone whose hands know the weight of a sword. 7 years of service as a page have carved away your softness like a sculptor chiseling marble, leaving behind lean muscle and watchful eyes. The Lord has deemed you ready for the next phase of your transformation. You will become a squire to one of his knights, a man whose scarred face tells stories of battles fought in lands whose names you cannot pronounce. Your new master is a veteran of campaigns in the Holy Land, where Christian armies clashed with forces that fought beneath crescented banners. His left hand bears only 3 fingers, the others lost to a blade in some distant siege, and when he removes his shirt, you see the puckered flesh where an arrow once found its mark between the joints of his mail. He speaks little, but when he does, his words carry the weight of experience earned through blood and suffering. The knight's equipment becomes your responsibility, and you quickly discover that maintaining the tools of war is an art unto itself. Chainmail must be cleaned link by link. each piece of metal scrubbed free of rust with sand and oil until it gleams like silver water. A single brown spot overlooked can spell disaster in battle, where the difference between life and death often comes down to whether armor holds or fails when struck by an enemy's blade. Your fingers learn to feel for weakness in the metal, testing each link for signs of fatigue or damage. The process is meditative in its repetition. Hours spent in the armory. The only sounds the whisper of cloth against steel and the distant murmur of castle life beyond the stone walls. The chainmail weighs nearly 50 pounds when complete, a burden that will rest upon your master's shoulders when he rides to war. The sword receives even more careful attention than the armor. You learn that a blade is more than mere metal. It is a living thing that must be respected and understood. The edge must be honed to razor sharpness, yet not so thin that it becomes brittle. You practice the precise angle needed when drawing the whetstone along the steel, listening for the singing note that indicates the proper technique. Too steep, and you ruin the blade's geometry. Too shallow, and the edge remains dull, useless in the moment when your master's life depends upon its bite. Your education in weaponry extends beyond maintenance to understanding. Your master teaches you the names of each part of his sword, the fuller that runs down the blade's center to reduce weight without sacrificing strength, the crossguard that protects his hand from sliding onto the cutting edge, the pommel that provides balance and can serve as a weapon in close quarters. You learn that different blade shapes serve different purposes, that the weapon a knight carries reveals much about his fighting style and the enemies he expects to face. Training begins before the sun crests the castle walls. In the courtyard, wooden posts bear the scars of countless practice sessions, their surfaces gouged and splintered by generations of would-be warriors learning their craft. Your master demonstrates the basic cuts. Overhead strikes that can split a man from crown to groin. Horizontal sweeps designed to open an opponent's side. Upward thrusts that seek the gap beneath a raised arm. Each movement must become instinctive, burned into muscle memory through endless repetition. Your own weapons training starts with implements of wood and leather. The practice sword weighs half as much as true steel, yet after an hour of drilling, your arms shake with exhaustion. Your master shows no mercy in these sessions, his commands cutting through the morning air like blade strokes. Again, faster. Your enemy will not wait for you to remember the proper stance. The wooden sword becomes an extension of your will, though your body protests each swing with growing soreness. The quinton stands at the courtyard's center, a rotating post topped with a wooden shield and weighted bag. You learn to charge this device on horseback, lance couched beneath your arm, aiming for the shield's center while avoiding the spinning bag that can knock an unwary rider from his saddle. Your first attempts end in humiliation, the weight swinging around to strike you squarely in the back, sending you tumbling into the dirt while your master watches with stone-faced patience. Horsemanship becomes as crucial as weapon skill. The destrier, the great war horse that carries a knight into battle, is a creature bred for violence. Standing 17 hands high and weighing more than a dozen men, these animals are weapons in their own right, trained to strike with iron-shod hooves and bite with teeth that can crush bone. You learn to approach them with respect and confidence, understanding that any sign of fear will be immediately detected and exploited. Your legs develop the iron grip needed to maintain your seat while wielding weapons, your thighs burning as you practice mounted combat drills. The horse's movement becomes a rhythm you must match, your body moving in harmony with the animal's gait, even as you focus on striking targets or defending against imaginary opponents. falls are frequent and painful, the hard-packed earth of the training yard showing no mercy to those who lose their balance. The social dynamics of castle life grow more complex as a squire. You are no longer merely a servant, but not yet a peer of the knights you serve alongside. The other squires become your companions in this strange liminal space, young men caught between childhood and the full responsibilities of warfare. Competition runs fierce among your group. Who can maintain armor to the highest standard, who shows the greatest promise with weapons, who will be the first to earn his spurs and join the ranks of true knights. Your master begins to share stories of actual combat, tales that strip away any romantic notions about the glory of battle. He speaks of men dying slowly from infected wounds, of battles won through cunning rather than courage, of the moment when training gives way to the animal desperation of survival. His words paint pictures of mud mixed with blood, of horses screaming in pain, of the particular sound an arrow makes when it finds flesh rather than armor. Sleep becomes precious and elusive. Your body aches from the day's training. Muscles you never knew existed announcing their presence through constant soreness. Yet your mind races with new knowledge, techniques to master, weaknesses to correct, the 1,000 small details that separate a living knight from a dead one. You fall into dreams filled with the clash of steel and wake to begin the cycle anew. The seasons turn, and you feel yourself changing in ways both subtle and profound. Your body grows harder and more resilient, your reflexes sharpen, and your understanding of violence deepens from abstract concept to practical knowledge. You are becoming something new. No longer the frightened child who was torn from his mother's arms, but not yet the fully formed warrior you are destined to become. You are 16 when you first taste your own blood in combat. The metallic tang filling your mouth as a practice sword connects with your jaw during a particularly brutal training session. Your master watches without sympathy as you spit crimson into the dust, his weathered face showing neither approval nor disappointment. Pain is a teacher, he says simply, gesturing for you to raise your guard again. Learn what it has to tell you. The castle has become your entire world, its walls containing the sum of your existence. Beyond those stones lies a realm you barely remember. Fields where your father's serfs once tended crops, a village where children played games you can no longer recall. That distant life feels like something glimpsed in a dream, increasingly unreal compared to the immediate reality of steel and sweat, and the constant ache in your muscles that signals growth. Your training has evolved beyond the wooden posts and practice weapons of earlier years. Now you face other squires in mock combat, your sword ringing against theirs in patterns that grow more complex with each passing month. The wooden blades have given way to blunted steel, weapons that can break bones and split flesh despite their dulled edges. Every bout carries the risk of genuine injury, and the castle's physician has become familiar with the particular wounds that training produces. The first time you draw blood from another squire, a boy whose name you've shared meals with for 3 years, the moment freezes in your memory like winter preserving a leaf. Your blade slides past his guard and opens a line across his forearm, bright red blooming against pale skin. He staggers backward, shock replacing concentration in his eyes, and you feel something shift inside yourself. This is what your training has been leading toward. The moment when theoretical knowledge becomes visceral reality. Your master begins taking you beyond the castle walls on his lesser duties, expeditions that serve as practical education in the realities of knightly service. You ride beside him as he collects rents from distant villages, your eyes taking in the bent backs of peasants who work from dawn to dusk to produce the wealth that maintains castle life. Their homes are simple affairs of mud and thatch, structures that could be destroyed by a single torch, yet they contain entire families whose lives unfold in spaces smaller than your master's bedchamber. The contrast between castle and village life strikes you with uncomfortable force. While you consume meat at every meal and sleep on a proper mattress, these people subsist on bread and porridge, their children's ribs visible beneath tattered clothing. Yet they show deference when your master approaches, bowing their heads and offering what little they have with expressions that mix respect and barely concealed resentment. During one such expedition, bandits strike a merchant caravan traveling the road ahead of you. You arrive to find 3 men dead and their goods scattered across the muddy track, their blood slowly seeping into the earth while ravens circle overhead. Your master dismounts to examine the scene with professional interest, pointing out the tactical mistakes that led to the merchant's deaths. "They'd bunched together when attacked," he observes, nudging a corpse with his boot. "Made themselves easy targets." The dead men's faces remain with you that night as you lie on your bedroll beside the road. Their expressions of surprise and pain seem burned into your vision, and you realize this is what awaits those who fail in combat. Not the clean, quick deaths of romantic tales, but messy, undignified endings where life pours out through wounds while the living go about their business. Sleep comes fitfully, filled with dreams of steel and screaming. Your relationship with the other squires grows more complex as competition intensifies. Friendships forged during your page years begin to strain under the pressure of advancement. Each of you knows that only the most promising will be selected for knighthood when the time comes, and this knowledge colors every interaction. The boy who once shared his bread with you now watches your training sessions with calculating eyes, measuring your progress against his own. Combat practice becomes increasingly realistic, the line between training and actual violence blurring as your master pushes you toward the threshold of true warfare. You learn to fight while exhausted, muscles screaming for rest but mind focused on survival. You discover the peculiar intimacy of combat, how close you must come to another person to kill them, how their breath mingles with yours in the moment before blades meet flesh. The castle's great hall hosts visiting knights throughout the winter months, warriors returning from campaigns in distant lands who bring tales of real battles fought for actual stakes. You serve at their tables, pouring wine and clearing plates while listening to stories that strip away any remaining illusions about the glory of war. They speak of sieges where starvation claimed more lives than swords, of diseases that swept through armies like wildfire, of comrades who died slowly from infected wounds while begging for death. One night, his left arm ending in a stump where his hand once was, describes the siege of a fortress where defenders threw boiling oil from the walls, the liquid metal finding gaps in attacking knights' armor and cooking the flesh beneath. Another tells of a battle where rain turned the field to mud so deep that fallen warriors drowned in their own armor, too weighted down to rise before the mire claimed them. These stories become part of your education, lessons in the reality that awaits beyond the castle walls. Your master's demeanor toward you begins to shift subtly as your skills develop. The harsh corrections of earlier years give way to more nuanced instruction, as if he finally sees potential worth cultivating rather than merely another boy to be broken down and rebuilt. This change brings its own pressure, the weight of expectations that you will prove worthy of the time and effort invested in your training. Physical changes mirror the evolution in your skills. Your shoulders broaden from hours of sword work, your hands develop the distinctive calluses of a warrior, and your face loses the last traces of boyish softness. When you catch your reflection in polished metal, a stranger looks back, someone harder and more dangerous than the child who once wept for his mother's embrace. The approach of your 17th year brings whispers among the castle's inhabitants about who among the squires might be selected for advancement. The ceremony of knighthood looms in your future like a distant mountain peak, visible, but still requiring a treacherous journey to reach. You understand now that survival of training is only the first challenge, proving yourself worthy of the spurs and sword belt, and that mark true knighthood will demand everything you have learned and more. Your dreams begin to feature battles you have never fought, enemies whose faces shift like smoke, and the weight of decisions that will determine not just your own fate but the lives of those who might one day follow you into combat. The boy who once feared the dark now finds himself becoming something that others might fear, a transformation as complete as it is irreversible. You are 18 when your master finally speaks the words you have waited years to hear. "You will keep the vigil this spring," he announces after a particularly grueling training session, his scarred face betraying no emotion. The weight of those simple words settles upon your shoulders like armor, heavier than any mail you have carried. After 11 years of preparation, service, and endless drilling, you stand at the threshold of true knighthood. The weeks leading to your vigil pass in a blur of preparation that extends far beyond the physical. Your master's demeanor shifts once again, becoming almost paternal as he shares the deeper mysteries of knighthood, lessons that cannot be learned through sword work or horsemanship alone. He speaks of the weight of command, the burden of making decisions that will determine whether other men live or die, and the loneliness that comes with responsibility no amount of training can fully prepare you for. Your equipment must be perfected for the ceremony. Every link of your mail hauberk receives individual attention, polished until the metal gleams like water under sunlight. Your sword, no longer the practice weapon of your squire days, but true steel meant for killing, rests in your hands with newfound significance. The blade that once seemed like merely another tool now feels like an extension of your soul, its weight both familiar and terrible. The castle's chapel becomes your second home as you prepare for the spiritual aspects of knighthood. The priest, a man whose soft hands have never known the weight of a sword, attempts to explain the religious obligations that will bind you once you take your vows. You kneel before carved stone saints whose faces seem to judge your worthiness, their painted eyes following your movements with what feels like divine scrutiny. The other squires watch your preparations with expressions that mix envy and relief. Some burn with jealousy that you have been chosen first, their competitiveness flaring into barely concealed resentment. Others seem grateful that the pressure of advancement has passed to you, understanding that knighthood brings burdens as well as privileges. The easy camaraderie of your shared training gives way to a distance that cannot be bridged. You are becoming something different, and everyone can sense the change. Your master begins sharing stories of his own vigil, tales he has never told before. He speaks of the long night spent alone in the chapel, wrestling with doubts about his worthiness while cold stone pressed against his knees. "I thought of my father that night," he admits, his voice softer than you have ever heard it. "A good man who died working another lord's fields, never knowing if his sacrifice to send me away had been worthwhile." The concept of sacrifice begins to reveal its true meaning as your vigil approaches. You realize that becoming a knight means accepting that your life is no longer entirely your own. The peasants who work the surrounding lands, the merchants who travel the roads under your lord's protection, the very stability of the realm itself, all will depend partly on your strength, your decisions, your willingness to die for people you may never meet. Letters arrive from your family's village, carried by a merchant who remembers your father's name. The news they contain strikes you like a physical blow. Your mother passed away the previous winter, succumbing to a fever that might have been treatable if she had access to the castle's physician. She died calling your name, the merchant reports, asking for the son who had been taken from her arms 11 years ago. The grief that follows is unlike anything your training prepared you for. You have learned to endure physical pain, to function despite exhaustion, to face the prospect of violent death with equanimity. But this hollow ache in your chest proves more difficult to bear than any wound. Your master finds you weeping in the armory, your tears falling onto the mail you were supposed to be cleaning. This too is part of knighthood, he says quietly, settling beside you on the stone floor. The knowledge that service demands sacrifice, not just from you, but from those who love you. Your mother gave her son to create a knight. Honor that gift by being worthy of it. The vigil itself begins at sunset on the feast day of a warrior saint whose name you have been practicing to pronounce correctly. You enter the chapel alone, dressed in simple white robes that feel strange after years of wearing practical clothing. The stone walls seem to press closer in the flickering candlelight, and the silence becomes so complete you can hear your own heartbeat echoing in the vaulted space. Kneeling before the altar, your sword laid bare across the stone, you begin the longest night of your life. The hours stretch endlessly as you contemplate the vows you will take at dawn, promises to protect the weak, defend the church, speak truth, and show mercy to the defeated. Each word carries weight that you are only beginning to understand, obligations that will bind you until death releases you from their burden. The chapel grows cold as the night deepens, the stone floor seeming to leach warmth from your body through your knees. Your legs cramp and your back aches, but you dare not shift position. This discomfort is intentional, designed to focus your mind on the seriousness of the commitment you are making. Physical pain becomes a teacher, as your master always said, instructing you in the discipline that knighthood will require. Memories flood through your consciousness as the vigil continues. Your mother's face as you were taken from her. The first time you held a sword, the moment you drew blood from another squire. The merchant's stories of distant battles. Each recollection feels like a step on a path that has led inexorably to this moment, where a frightened 7-year-old boy finally transforms into something else entirely. Dawn approaches with agonizing slowness, grey light beginning to filter through the chapel's narrow windows. Your vigil is nearly complete, but you understand now that this night marks not an ending, but a true beginning. The boy who entered this chapel will not be the man who emerges. The transformation that began when you left your mother's arms reaches its culmination in this cold, silent space where you kneel before God and your own uncertain future. The first birds begin to sing outside the stone walls, their voices carrying promises of warmth and light. Soon your Lord will arrive to administer your vows, to gird you with sword and spurs, to speak the words that will make you a knight in truth as well as name. But first, you must complete these final hours of solitude, facing the magnitude of what you are about to become, and the price that transformation has already cost. Your mother's absence feels particularly acute in this moment of triumph. She will never see you knighted, never know if the sacrifice she made, giving up her son to create a warrior, was worthwhile. This knowledge settles into your bones alongside the cold, becoming part of the weight you will carry for the rest of your days. You rise from your knees as the first rays of sunlight pierce the chapel's coloured glass, your legs trembling from the night's vigil. The white robes that seemed so pristine at sunset now bear the wrinkles and stains of your solitary struggle, evidence of prayers whispered and tears shed in the darkness. Your sword still lies before the altar, its blade catching the morning light like captured fire, waiting to be blessed and returned to your hand as the instrument of your new calling. The chapel doors swing open with a sound that echoes through the vaulted space, and your lord enters flanked by the castle's senior knights. Their mail gleams in the morning light, and their faces carry the gravity befitting this ancient ceremony. Behind them follows the priest, his robes rustling against the stone floor as he approaches the altar where you stand. The moment you have trained for since childhood has finally arrived, yet you feel strangely unprepared for its weight. Your Lord's voice fills the chapel as he begins the ritual words that will transform you from squire to knight. Do you swear to fear God and maintain his church? The question hangs in the air like incense, demanding an answer that will bind your soul. Your voice, when it comes, sounds strange in your own ears, deeper somehow, carrying the weight of years and the promise of service yet to come. I swear it, you reply, the words echoing off stone walls that have witnessed this ceremony countless times before. The questions continue, each one adding another layer to the obligations you are accepting. Will you serve your liege lord in valor and faith? Will you protect the weak and defenseless? Will you give succor to widows and orphans? Will you despise pecuniary reward? Will you despise the world's goods? Each, I swear it, that passes your lips feels like a chain being forged, binding you to a code that will govern every aspect of your remaining days. The priest blesses your sword with holy oils, his Latin words transforming the steel from mere weapon into sacred instrument. As he hands it back to you, the blade seems to carry new weight, not physical, but spiritual. This is no longer simply a tool for killing, but a symbol of justice that you are sworn to wield in service of higher powers than yourself. The responsibility makes your hand shake almost imperceptibly as you grasp the familiar hilt. Your lord approaches, and you kneel before him one final time as a squire. His own sword, scarred from countless battles, rests briefly on your shoulder as he speaks the words that will change your very nature. Be thou a good knight and true, he commands, his voice carrying the authority of feudal law and divine sanction. The blade lifts, and when it descends in the ceremonial blow that marks your elevation, you feel the boy you once were die completely. The golden spurs, symbols of knighthood, since time immemorial, are fastened to your heels by hands that have performed this ritual many times before. Each buckle clicks into place with finality, marking you as one who has earned the right to ride to war in service of your lord. The spurs will never be removed, except in disgrace, and their weight against your ankles serves as a constant reminder of the vows you have just sworn. Your new sword belt, crafted from the finest leather and adorned with metalwork that speaks of your elevated status, encircles your waist. The scabbard hangs at your side with practiced ease, its weight as familiar as your own heartbeat, yet somehow different now that it marks you as a knight rather than a squire. Every piece of your new regalia carries symbolic meaning that extends far beyond mere decoration. The assembled knights welcome you into their brotherhood with solemn nods and firm handshakes. Their eyes reflect understanding of what you have just undertaken. They too have stood where you stand, have felt the weight of vows settling upon their shoulders like invisible armor. Some show approval at your completion of the long journey from page to knight, while others reserve judgment, knowing that the true test of knighthood comes not in ceremony but in the crucible of actual service. Your former master approaches as the formal ceremony concludes, his scarred face showing something that might almost be pride. "You are no longer my squire," he says simply, his words carrying more weight than any elaborate speech. "You are my brother in arms." The handshake he offers is firm, calloused palm meeting calloused palm, and in that moment you understand that you have crossed a threshold that can never be recrossed. The great hall buzzes with celebration as news of your knighting spreads throughout the castle. Servants who once commanded your obedience now bow respectfully when you pass, their deference a visible reminder of your changed status. The other squires watch with expressions that mix envy, admiration, and uncertainty about their own futures. You remember standing in their place, wondering if you would ever prove worthy of advancement. A feast is prepared in your honor, but the food tastes strange in your mouth. The meat seems too rich, the wine too sweet, as if your elevated status has somehow altered your very senses. You sit at the high table now, no longer serving but being served, yet the privilege feels more like burden than reward. Every bite carries the weight of obligation. Every cup of wine a reminder of the sobriety your new role demands. That night, sleep comes fitfully despite your exhaustion. Your dreams are filled with visions of battles yet to be fought, of decisions that will test the vows you have just sworn. You see yourself leading men into combat, their lives depending on your judgment and courage. You witness moments of triumph and failure, glory and shame, all the myriad possibilities that stretch before you like paths through a dark forest. The weight of your new responsibilities settles upon you like a familiar burden. You understand now that knighthood is not the culmination of your training, but its beginning in earnest. Everything you have learned, the weapon skills, the horsemanship, the tactical knowledge, were merely tools to prepare you for this moment. The real education starts now, in the crucible of actual service, where theoretical knowledge must be transformed into practical wisdom. Your chamber, once shared with other squires, now belongs to you alone. The solitude feels strange after years of communal living, and you find yourself missing the easy companionship of your former peers. Knight you may be, but the isolation that comes with command is already beginning to make itself felt. You stare out your window at the castle courtyard where new pages and squires continue their training, their struggles familiar, yet distant. The morning brings new duties and responsibilities that reflect your elevated status. You will no longer merely maintain another knight's equipment. You must now manage your own affairs, make decisions about your horse, your weapons, your very survival. The freedom is intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you have learned to fly. Letters must be written to inform distant relatives of your achievement, though you wonder if any still remember the boy who was taken from his village so many years ago. Your mother's absence feels particularly acute as you compose these messages, knowing she will never read the words that might have brought her pride. The quill trembles in your hand as you write, ink blotting the parchment like tears that refuse to fall. You are 19 when the summons to war arrives, carried by a mud-splattered messenger whose horse foams at the mouth from hard riding. Your lord's banner has been called to join a campaign against rebels who have dared to challenge the king's authority in the northern marches. The parchment bearing your orders feels heavier than armor as you read the formal language that will carry you away from the castle's familiar walls toward your first taste of actual warfare. The preparations for campaign consume the next fortnight in a frenzy of activity that transforms the castle from a place of routine into a military staging ground. Blacksmiths work through the night, their hammers ringing against anvils as they repair weapons and shoe horses. The castle's stores are inventoried and packed into wagons that will follow the army, carrying the supplies necessary to keep men and animals alive in hostile territory. Your own preparations carry particular weight, as this campaign will mark your first service as a true knight rather than a squire following in another's shadow. The equipment that once belonged to your training now becomes the tools upon which your survival depends. Every piece of armor receives meticulous attention. Every weapon is tested and retested. Every strap and buckle examined for signs of weakness that could prove fatal when battle is joined. The warhorse assigned to your service is a massive destrier named Thunder, whose scarred flanks speak of previous campaigns. The animal regards you with intelligent eyes that seem to measure your worthiness, understanding perhaps better than you do what lies ahead. Hours are spent learning his temperament, his responses to rein and spur, the particular rhythm of his gait that you must match when wielding weapons from his back. Your first night on campaign, sleeping on hard ground with only your cloak for warmth, brings home the reality of military life with uncomfortable clarity. The straw mattress and stone walls of the castle seem like luxuries of a distant past, as you listen to the sounds of an army settling into uneasy rest, men coughing, horses snorting, sentries calling challenges into the darkness that presses against the camp's flickering fires. The march north takes you through countryside you have never seen, past villages whose inhabitants watch your passage with expressions that mix curiosity and fear. These people understand that armies bring disruption regardless of their cause or banner, that the passage of armed men means trampled crops, requisitioned supplies, and the ever-present possibility of violence spilling over onto innocents, caught in war's path. Your first sight of the enemy comes on a grey morning when scout reports arrive describing rebel forces positioned across a river valley that blocks your army's advance. The enemy numbers are uncertain, their intentions unclear, but their presence transforms theoretical preparation into immediate reality. Tonight you will sleep knowing that tomorrow might bring your first true battle, where the training of years will be tested against men who fight for their lives. The night before, battle passes in a strange mixture of mundane tasks and profound contemplation. Equipment must be checked one final time, prayers offered to saints whose protection you desperately hope to secure, and letters written to loved ones who may never see you again. Your hand shakes slightly as you compose what might be your final words, the quill seeming inadequate to express the weight of thoughts that crowd your mind. Dawn breaks grey and cold over the valley, where two armies face each other across a narrow strip of land that will soon be transformed into a charnel house. Your armor feels heavier than ever as squires help you into the mail hauberk that may preserve your life or become your tomb. The weight of steel against your body provides physical comfort, even as your mind races with fears and uncertainties that no amount of training could fully prepare you for. The battle begins with a flight of arrows that darkens the sky like a cloud of deadly locusts. You watch men fall around you, their screams mixing with the whistle of incoming shafts and the clash of steel on steel as the two armies collide. The ordered formations of the morning dissolve into chaos as individual fights spread across the field like wildfire, consuming dry grass. Your first kill comes almost by accident, your sword finding the gap between an enemy knight's helmet and Gorget as he struggles with a fallen horse. The blade slides through flesh and muscle with shocking ease, and you feel his life end through the steel that connects you. His eyes widen in surprise, then glaze over as death claims him, and you realize with horrible clarity that taking life is far easier than the stories suggested. The battle swirls around you in a nightmare of violence that bears no resemblance to the ordered combats of training. Men die screaming, horses scream louder than their riders, and the ground becomes slick with blood that makes footing treacherous. You fight not with the calculated precision of the practice yard, but with the desperate fury of an animal cornered by predators. Time seems to stretch and compress simultaneously during the combat. Moments feel like hours as you parry a thrust aimed at your heart, while entire engagements pass in heartbeats that leave you gasping and amazed to still be alive. Your training saves you repeatedly, muscle memory guiding your blade when conscious thought fails, ingrained reflexes moving your shield to block attacks your eyes never see coming. The enemy breaks before noon, their lines collapsing as word spreads that their leader has fallen to a crossbow bolt. What began as a battle degenerates into a rout as defeated men flee across the valley floor, pursued by mounted knights whose lances find fleeing backs with methodical efficiency. The sight of slaughter continues long after victory is assured, the excitement of battle making killers of men who might show mercy in calmer moments. You find yourself pursuing a young squire who runs on foot through the muddy fields, his own horse lost somewhere in the chaos. He stumbles and falls, rolling onto his back to face his death with wide eyes that remind you uncomfortably of your own reflection. Your sword hovers above his throat as he gasps out pleas for mercy in a dialect you barely understand. The moment stretches between you like a bridge over an abyss. This boy might be 16, perhaps 17, the same age you were when you first drew blood in training. His fear transforms his face into something barely human, yet beneath the terror you see someone's son, perhaps someone's only hope for the future. Your blade trembles as competing impulses war within your chest. Mercy wins this battle, though you cannot say why. Perhaps it is the memory of your own mother's face, or the echo of vows sworn in a chapel that seems impossibly distant from this field of carnage. You lower your sword and gesture for the boy to flee, watching as he scrambles to his feet and disappears into the growing dusk that signals an end to the day's killing. The victory feast that night tastes of ashes in your mouth despite the rich foods and flowing wine. Your companions celebrate with the wild joy of men who have faced death and emerged victorious, but you find yourself unable to share their enthusiasm. The faces of the men you killed haunt your thoughts, their final expressions burned into memory with the permanence of brands pressed into flesh. Sleep brings no peace, only dreams filled with screaming horses and the wet sound of steel piercing flesh. You wake repeatedly, your hand reaching instinctively for your sword before consciousness reminds you that the immediate danger has passed. The boy you spared appears in these dreams, sometimes thanking you, sometimes cursing you for showing weakness when strength was called for. You are 21 when you first understand that war is not merely about glorious battles, but about the slow grinding of human endurance against stone walls and stubborn will. The fortress of Ravenscroft squats on its hill like a diseased boil, its black stones seemingly impervious to the catapults that have hurled stones at its walls for 3 months without significant effect. What began as a swift campaign to crush rebellion has devolved into a test of patience that stretches both armies to their breaking points. The siege camp sprawls across the valley floor in a maze of mud, canvas and desperation that bears little resemblance to the orderly military formations of textbooks and training. Thousands of men live in conditions that would shame the meanest peasant hovel, their daily existence reduced to the basic struggle for food, warmth, and protection from diseases that kill more efficiently than enemy arrows. the romantic notion of knightly warfare withers under the reality of dysentery and despair. Your own tent, once a symbol of your elevated status, has become a cramped refuge that offers little protection from either weather or the constant stench of an army in the field. The leather walls leak during every rainfall, turning your living space into a muddy swamp where mold grows on equipment and clothing never fully dries. Sleep comes fitfully on a bed that consists of mouldy straw laid over ground that squelches with each movement. The siege engines dominate the landscape like wooden giants, their frames creaking ominously as engineers adjust tensions and trajectories in endless attempts to find the weakness that will breach Ravenscroft's walls. Trebuchets hurl massive stones with thunderous crashes that echo across the valley, while mangonels send smaller projectiles whistling through the air in arcing flights that sometimes find their marks with devastating effect. You have learned to judge the quality of the day by the number of bodies that emerge from the camp each morning, wrapped in whatever cloth can be spared for shrouds. The grave diggers have become among the busiest men in the army, their shovels creating neat rows of mounds that mark the passage of time better than any calendar. Disease shows no respect for rank. Knights die as easily as common soldiers when fever takes hold. The food situation grows more desperate with each passing week as supply lines stretch thin, and local foraging yields diminishing returns. What began as proper meals has devolved into thin gruel and whatever can be hunted or scavenged from the surrounding countryside. Horses, once proud destriers, worth small fortunes, are slaughtered when they become too weak to carry riders, their meat providing temporary relief from the gnawing hunger that has become every man's constant companion. Your own mount, Faithful Thunder, has grown gaunt despite your efforts to find him adequate forage. His ribs show clearly through his once glossy coat, and his eyes carry the dull resignation of an animal pushed beyond endurance. The decision to have him put down when his legs can no longer support even his reduced weight feels like losing a brother who has shared the worst moments of your military service. The defenders of Ravenscroft occasionally send messages over the walls tied to arrows or stones, taunting the besiegers with claims of plentiful supplies and comfortable quarters. Whether these boasts contain truth or desperate bravado, they serve their purpose of maintaining morale within the fortress while slowly corroding the spirits of the men who stare up at those impregnable walls day after day. Attempts to take the fortress by storm have failed repeatedly, each assault costing lives, while achieving nothing more than adding fresh corpses to the growing pile at the base of Ravenscroft's walls. You have participated in 3 such attacks, scrambling up scaling ladders while defenders pour boiling oil and drop stones from murder holes designed specifically to kill climbers. The memory of watching comrades fall beside you, their screams cut short by impacts that reduce men to broken meat, haunts your increasingly fitful sleep. The psychological toll of prolonged siege warfare reveals itself in ways both subtle and obvious. Some men retreat into religious mania, spending hours in prayer or flagellating themselves for sins both real and imagined. Others turn to dice and drinking, gambling away equipment they cannot afford to lose while drowning their fears in whatever alcohol can be procured through trade or theft. You find yourself falling into long periods of brooding contemplation, staring at Ravenscroft's walls, while your mind wanders through memories of castle life that seem impossibly distant and clean. The boy who once complained about cold stone floors and simple meals would weep to see the luxury such conditions represent compared to the filth and deprivation of siege warfare. Letters from home arrive sporadically, carried by messengers who brave dangerous roads to maintain communication with the outside world. The news they bring feels increasingly irrelevant, reports of harvest festivals and minor court intrigues from a realm that exists in a different universe than this valley of mud and death. Your responses, when you can find energy to write them, contain carefully edited accounts that omit the worst realities of your situation. The castle's physician has died of the same fever that claims common soldiers, leaving medical care to barber surgeons whose primary qualification is willingness to cut off infected limbs with whatever sharp instruments come to hand. You have watched knights who survived multiple battles succumb to wounds that fester in the unsanitary conditions of the camp, their deaths slower and more agonizing than anything combat provided. Winter approaches with the siege still unresolved, bringing new miseries to add to the existing catalogue of suffering. Fuel for fires becomes scarce, leaving men to huddle together for warmth, while their breath fogs in air that cuts through even the heaviest cloaks. Frostbite claims fingers and toes with the same methodical efficiency that disease claims lives, reducing the army's effective strength through attrition rather than dramatic losses. Some of the younger knights begin to question the wisdom of continuing the siege, their voices carrying dangerous undertones of mutiny that could spread like plague through the ranks. These whispered conversations happen in the darkest hours before dawn, when exhaustion and despair combine to make even treasonous thoughts seem reasonable. You listen without participating, understanding that such talk comes from desperation rather than genuine disloyalty. The fortress shows signs of strain as well, its defenders occasionally visible on the walls as gaunt figures who move with the careful economy of motion that indicates hunger's grip. Smoke from their fires grows thinner with each passing day, and the frequency of their taunting messages decreases noticeably. Perhaps the siege is working its slow magic on both sides of the stone walls, grinding down human endurance with the patience of geological time. A negotiated surrender begins to seem increasingly attractive to leaders on both sides, though pride prevents either from making the first overture toward ending this costly stalemate. The longer the siege continues, the more face each side stands to lose by backing down, creating a trap of honor that costs lives while preserving dignity. You begin to understand that wars are often won not by the strongest or most righteous, but by those who can endure suffering longest without breaking. You are 23 when you return from the siege of Ravenscroft, which finally ended not through glorious victory, but through negotiated surrender that satisfied no one completely. The castle that once seemed like the entire world now feels strangely small after months of open sky and endless horizons. Your reflection in polished metal reveals a face marked by experiences that have aged you beyond your years. Hollow cheeks, eyes that have seen too much, and a scar across your left temple where a defender's stone found its mark during the final assault. The great hall buzzes with celebration upon your return, but the festivities feel hollow after the grim realities of campaign life. Food tastes too rich after months of near starvation, wine too sweet after drinking from muddy streams, and the warmth of stone walls too comfortable after sleeping on frozen ground. You find yourself unable to fully participate in the revelry, standing apart from companions who seem to have already forgotten the friends they buried in foreign soil. Your lord has arranged a series of social gatherings to welcome his knights home and to cement political alliances that the recent campaign has made necessary. It is at one of these events that you first see her, the daughter of a neighboring lord whose lands border your own master's territory.